start streaming. Okay, and it's like a 10-second lag anyway. Well, there's everything. Okay, oh, of course, now you gotta start giving me notifications. Okay, then go over here. There we go. It says excellent connection.
Man, that is cool. What's it like in an excellent connection?
We'll see how long. We'll see how long that lasts. And now the next thing. Oh, what do we want to say for? We'll see how long that lasts.
Oh.
Absolutely.
I got everything that I wanted into this one too. Just clean and
I can't spell. Hey folks, there we go. There we go. Hey folks, we are looking forward to peeping. Margaret's side here because she's holding the Manticore ready to go.
Ready to go.
And I'm going to just turn everything over to her. So welcome, Margaret, and it's all yours.
Oh. Hi, everybody. So we all got our fancy kits from Whiz Kids with our super cool Manticore. He's really neat. We're going to be painting him today with everything that came in your kit. Well, I should say 99% of it. So the only substitutions is I'll be using a flat brush for base coating, and I'm not using this water cup, I'm using my own. And we aren't using Flesh Wash because I watched the video several times and they never used it. I'm also going to be utilizing water droppers because this paint needs to be thinned. It's extremely thick. And that's about it. Everything else is straight from the kit. So with that, let's get into it. Our first step tonight will be to base the main body, so all of his legs, his body, and then the tail. And we're going to do that with heavy ochre. I'm just going to open the pot up without getting it all over my hands. And I'm just going to scoop out some of this. Give it a few swirls to mix it up right into the well.
For a second after.
Yeah.
And, so we got some people trying to get on.
Oh, sure. I'm just gonna put a drop of water in this then. One-handed. You let me know when.
Absolutely. Jason is trying to get on. I'm going to put the other screen back on.
Sure.
They would be back. And Margaret's gonna get with it.
Hi. Hi everybody. Here's our Manticore from the new WizKids Paint Night box. He's super cool. I really like him. I'm using 99% of what came in the box. I am not using the water cup or flesh wash. I watched the video several times and they never used flesh wash, so I don't know why it was included. I'm also using a flat brush for basing. And because the video showed dry brushing rather than layering, and then they didn't include a dry brushing brush, we're going to be taking a slightly different approach to painting him than the video did, which is great because now you'll have two examples. So first off, with the body, we're going to base it in heavy ochre, the main body being the legs, the chest, and the tail. I've already scooped about 2 brushfuls, and I've added a drop of water, or even just a brush load of water, into the paint, stirred it up, so now it's nice and workable.
You can look at there.
Oh, okay. And we'll just get that on there. You may notice that there's a slightly different white on my Mini. I noticed when I took him out of the packaging, I don't know if it was user error or what, but the primer came off a little bit. If you've noticed the same thing on yours, just taking a little bit of the off-white paint and just putting it on there will do the trick for you. If you have white primer, that will work even better, but regardless, you should be fine either way. It's nothing to really worry about too much. So we're going to get him.
I guess we have to work on our sound a little bit.
Uh-oh. Do I need to project?
Let's see.
And it's okay if we get these spikes a little bit, because we'll go back and clean it up. Brush, brush, brush. Get in between his legs and under the belly. You can see why I wanted to use a larger brush. It's okay if you get messy, if it gets in the wrong spots. These are just base coats. We'll paint over it. It's not
sounds good now. Good.
Great. It's not the end of the world to get paint in the wrong spot. Don't forget about the insides of the legs. They are easy to forget about. And then what I'll do is then I'll just kind of take my brush and I'll just go in the same direction across the wet paint. Oh, forgot in between his wings. And what that will do is that it will help it not come out as splotchy as when I'm just laying the paint down. And it will make it look like a smoother base coat. Which, if we can keep our base coat smooth, then we can keep our layers smooth. So just going in the same direction. Get his arm. And there. Alright. So there's base coat number 1. The next one we're going to tackle is his mane. That's going to be in the heavy sienna. Now with this paint, we want to be very conservative about it for this paint job because it is in a lot of stuff. So I'm going to use a smaller brush to take some out. I'm going to use my janked up brush that I usually use for mixing paint. Yeah, that should be good. Took a brush full of water, just mixed it in there, clean the brush out, good to go. And then same thing, he's got all of these spikes in his mane, no worries about it. Oh, you know what I forgot? I forgot to get the underside of his wings, which is fine. We'll go back.
Tiny pink top.
Oh, no, no, I'm fine. If you've managed to if you run out of this heavy sienna, it is a kind of a reddish brown. It's more brown than red. It's not quite a mahogany. So any kind of substitute would work. I've matched it to Reaper's dark skin paint, which I brought with me because I'm notorious for wasting paint and will probably have to use it. But it's a nice color. And just for those playing at home, this is Vallejo paint, which is another one of the big companies alongside with Reaper and Citadel. So we're just going to kind of dab that on, be a little bit mindful of our skin. And we want to make sure we're coming right up to that face. It's okay if we come onto the face a little bit. Just brush, brush, brush. And then what I'll do, I'll go back and I'll get those spots on the wings that I missed. Get all those nooks and crannies behind the spikes. And you know, at some point you gotta kind of work down to a smaller brush. I'm just trying to stick with this one for the sake of getting the base coat on quickly, which is why mine may come out a little bit messy, because we all know how to put a base coat down. There. Almost. And then what I'm going to do, because I can actually still see that my ochre is still quite wet, which I am a little bit surprised, I'm going to just kind of blend in. Do a little bit of wet blending right there under the wing. Do a little wet blending. Take some ochre. Touch that up. There we go. Now I'll get these wing joints. And again, you don't have to be overly neat in this stage. He's another one that suffers from his wings being a little bit too close, but unlike the red dragon who you really had to fight with, his wings have a little bit more ply to them, so they are a little bit more flexible. Oh, and now his tail's going to get in my way. I am going to slow down a little bit though to give the body a chance to dry. I'm surprised that it's still wet. I'm pretty sure we don't want to stream. Whoop.
I'm just telling you where the camera is. Which one's on?
Pretty sure we don't want to stream where we're just waiting for paint to dry. Alright, so with his mane and now his entire body finally done, we're going to do his face and the underside of these two paws along with the lining of his rear paws, and we are going to do that in the heavy skin tone. I'm actually going to shake this first. So this is another one where we don't need a whole lot of it to begin with, so I'm going to use a smaller brush and get all of the previous paint off of it. There we go. Pop the bubble, paint, paint, water, thin it out. Thinning it out is actually also going to help us in the long run for conserving paint. Though I haven't really heard about too many folks having issues with that. So because his face is a smaller area, I'm going to use my smaller brush now. And we're just going to get this everywhere, over the eyes and the mouth. Come down, get in there. Has anybody painted their Manticore yet? And if so, did you use their video or did you go at it with your own style?
Which color was the face?
The face is heavy skin tone. And then I could see some spots where I could use more heavy sienna for the mane. So I'm gonna clean that off, boop boop. Pick up some more sienna on this brush. Just kind of work it in. You know, this is all touch-up stuff too, once we get to the next step. And then, so that's his face, and then we're going to continue to use the same color for the underside of his paws. And we're also going to kind of come up around the lip of the paw with them towards the top of the hand. So we're going to get all his toes and then just a little bit more going up. So and it could come down his arm a little bit too, so that it's more of a transition into the color rather than suddenly heavy skin tone. And we can get the top of his toes. And even into the webbing a little bit. So we'll do that one. We'll get this one. This one can be kind of a weird angle, which is why a paint holder or a mini holder is really nice. I'm just using a bottle of craft paint with some poster tack to keep him from falling off, so I can hold him at a weird angle like this. And you know, we'll do the best that we can. A nice rule of thumb is if you can't quite get to it, just put some black on the end of your brush and just shove it in there. Because the eye will naturally look away from anything dark, like dark black or dark blue. And then we'll get along the side of the paw again, get the top of his toes. See, one thing I want to correct where I got a little overzealous. There we go. And then we'll do a little less with his back paws. We'll just kind of get around their rim like so. Just brush, brush. And we'll get the top of the toes a little bit, like that very knuckle at the end of them. And then we'll get the other foot. And then across the toes. So you see any spots that you've missed on the body, like I have, go right ahead, touch them up. Alright. So, next one are his wings. His wings will be based in tan. And I'm going to use my big brush again for this. And we're going to do the webbing and the knuckles. So all of it's going to be tan. So I'm going to open that up. I'm going to take 2 scoops of paint. And I'm just going to use a drop of water. Whoop, that was 2. That's okay. I'm going to just get the excess paint off so that we're not globbing it on.
Abby just jumped on. She says she's a little bit behind, but
Well, we just started, Abby. If you want to catch up, the body's base coated in heavy ochre. The mane is base coated in heavy sienna. And the face and the underside of the paws are done in heavy skin tone. And now we're on the wing, which is going to be base coated in tan. And I can repeat everything that I've said as many times as folks need. So then,
when you get a second, if you talked about the wet palette, what you're using for your thing.
oh, the well palette.
Well, yeah.
So, WizKids designed their tray to be used like a well palette, which is really nice. So most painters use one of three kinds of palettes. The wet palette, which is that one that's got the paper and the sponge underneath it, or the well palette, which is what I mostly use, which is like this. It's got all the openings, but they more look like these three top ones, or a dry palette or a tile. I prefer the well palette because it gives you a lot more consistency and control over how much you're thinning your paints, because you can thin them individually rather than pressing down on the sponge and hoping that you can get the same mix and consistency you had an hour ago, essentially. But I mean, well palette works for my style, wet palette works for other styles, so it's really dealer's choice on what works best for how you specifically paint. I find the well palette to be more forgiving, but there is the issue that it does dry out. So we'll get in here, we'll get this way. I mean, the wings are a little awkward, especially his half folded wing, so that's why I'm doing that one first. And you know, if you'd rather your oh god, I don't know what you would call these. I'm gonna just keep calling them the knuckles. If you'd rather the knuckles be the same color as the body, go for it. I'm just trying to conserve the colors, and I know I don't use tan that much past this. There. Get in here. Alright, good news, the body's dry finally. Which is actually kind of nice. So, I've been watching the body dry as I've been working on the other parts, and this paint is actually great paint for wet blending, which is taking two colors while the paint is still wet and essentially just smushing them together to get a blend, to get a transition of color. And that's really nice, because with other paints you have to add like drying retarder to stop them from drying so quickly. So that's kind of cool. I like that a lot. Go ahead and make sure, I usually miss it, and I missed it right here, that you get the edge of the wings, or else you'll have a white stripe going across. So far, we are staying in line with the instructional video, if you watched it. And our next step is when we will deviate.
And then we had a, when you were talking about the well, someone made a comment, you can also, could add slow, dry, medium to well?
Yeah, that's the drying retarder. You can actually use it to quote unquote thin your paints, because it's just about as thin as water, and it works great. I painted an armadillo, a were armadillo, And to get kind of like that pink and gray shell pattern that they have, I use drying retarder to slow down the paint so I could wet blend that color. Alright, now I'm going to just kind of switch over to a smaller brush to get the hard to reach spots before we move on. It fix up a little bit. There we go.
Milo wants to know what the wing color is.
The wing color is tan. It is some version of what somebody thinks tan looks like, because I would have called this peach. I don't know about anybody else, but I'm not really used to a pink tan. Get right there. So you'll probably notice that I do have a bit of white, but I'm not really paying attention to it. That's because that's all in areas that I know are going to get a shading color. So I'm not too worried about them being white now. Alright, and then next on our base coat, I lied. I need to get underneath these spikes first. Just get the last of this. His tail's gonna be kind of tricky, so don't get frustrated with him. If it's proving to be too crazy for you between the spikes and the skin tone, just make it all bone. Don't worry about getting the yellow in between the spikes and then trying to paint the spikes around it. I'm going to try to, but I might just rely on our wash to do all the shading around the spikes. Alright. And then speaking of the spikes, our last base color is for all his teeth, claws, and spikes, and we will be using bone white for that. So just give it a shake. There we go. I'm just going to take about 2 brushfuls again. Add the drop of water. I'm going to try to do it down the brush though, so that I can get more paint off of it. What?
Devin wants to know, did we get to the color of the claws, or is that later?
Such a butt. We are just getting to it now. Because bone is always last in my book. So, he's got lots of spikes. Anything that was sticking you painfully while you were trying to base coat the body, get some off-white. Or, sorry, bone white. Speaking of off-white, I don't know how many folks had this issue with their pot, but if you got a chunky bone white, try to put a drop of water in the pot and then take the end of your brush and really mix it up. And that should kind of help alleviate the chunkiness of it. There's an issue with white pigment with some companies versus their bases, and it's all chemistry, hoo-ha, and all that. But putting a drop of water in can help it, or you can just use a different white paint if it's giving you too much grief. I'm going to try to use mine, but I might switch over to a different off-white just to speed things up so I'm not fighting with the paint. And then for anybody who's curious, on the back of the box where they have all the paint listed, Next to each paint is a number. That's the identification number of the paint if you want to order the actual bottles of them. Much like how if you've been buying Reaper paint, you'll see that Reaper paint has an 09 4 or an 09 whatever. It's kind of the same thing.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Let me bring my palette closer.
Yeah.
Eileen.
Mr. Guy over here took it out, so.
I'm almost 6 feet tall, so we'll figure it out. I'm an amateur streamer too. So you can, I'm putting paint on these like thorns on going up his tail. You can skip that if you want to. If you'd rather make that more like his skin, having these little protrusions in them, go right ahead. That would work out really cool too. I'm just doing it because it's very methodical. And this is probably going to be the most tedious part of the whole thing, is picking out this tail, which is why I'm doing it first. Although his mane's probably going to be just as bad. But that's okay, we're painters. If you catch a little bit of the yellow because that paint is still wet, don't worry about it. This bone white is already a yellowed white to begin with, so you're just adding more interesting color to it. Like I just got some right here on this bottom guy. And his big spikes. Get all of these little guys. And if you go a little bit too crazy like I just did, I had a little paint blorf, don't worry about it. You can go back over with the, what did we use, heavy ochre, and you can touch that up, no problem. White's easy. When you go crazy with white, it's easy to touch it up. Thank you. Such service. The reason why we're thinning the paints, not only to kind of trick reality and get more paint, but it also kind of gives us a nice, we're not obscuring any details. And this Vallejo paint, it's naturally thick, so like you really do need to thin it, or else you're going to end up with kind of this mess almost. And it is water soluble, so water is really all that you need to thin it. You don't have to do anything crazy. It doesn't seem to need flow improver. It's moving pretty well off of the brush. Flow improver would just do as it sounds like, which would just make the paint move better, but this one's doing pretty good. Make sure that you get underneath these spikes and worry about the ones that you can see. If it starts to feel tedious, look at the mini from the angles that you will be looking at it normally and worry about what you can see there. You're not going to be looking at him like this most of the time. So if you start to feel like something's getting a little bit too tedious, think of that as a workaround. Unless you, obviously, if this is like your favorite monster and you want to paint him up to the 9s, then yeah, you would be painting him much slower than this. And you would be getting into all of the nooks and crannies. But that's a nice way to not start to feel like you're getting overworked or you're getting frustrated with it, especially with that mess going on with his tail. Like, I don't want to deal with those nooks and crannies, let alone get hit by that thing. We're going to get these little claws on his wings. Make sure that you get into the corner. And then he does have spikes in his mane. There are these longer protrusions coming out of the hair. So just wick some white onto them. And remember, think about the angle that you're going to be looking at him when picking these out, if it becomes to be very frustrating. I need my glasses for that. Oh my goodness. He's got a lot. And these are another thing, kind of like the ones going up his tail, where you could leave them. Or you could do something else with them. I've seen some folks paint them black, and it looked pretty cool, kind of like dragon bone. But man, if we were worried about that body being dry before the next step, there's nothing to worry about now. Get that. And don't worry if you miss one, it's gonna happen. I'm gonna miss a couple. Unless, like I keep saying, if it's your, man, I like this guy so much that I'm gonna really sit down and take my time with him. And if we're just getting him ready for our players, they're not going to notice that you missed a bony spike. They're going to be more focused on, oh my god, what do we do? And so this is when the angle of the view really comes into play with these inside spikes. They're a little tricky to get to, so just do the best that you can. You know, if you don't get all the way down to the base, that's okay. If you can't really quite get underneath one, that's okay too. There. He doesn't have any right here in his armpit. Something I like to think that he got into a fight and he broke those off already. I'm going to bring this a little bit closer so my arm doesn't go across that camera. Alright. So, look them over. Check for any spots where you got a little crazy with the paint like I did right here. And just cover that up. Get that. Get that. Alright. So here we are so far with our base coat. Oh, I forgot his teeth and his claws. Oh, goodness. He has so many spikes. You could just pick out going around them. Or if you're more comfortable, wait until the end to do his teeth. I normally like to do teeth and claws last. Which in this case, I think I will do the claws last. And I like to do that just because I like to be able to spread my paint around, so to say. And then I come in and I clean up the edges with the teeth. So, now that our base coat is done on the main figure, base always comes last because as you can see we'll get a lot of paint on it. The next thing we are going to do is we're going to take our sepia wash, and we're not going to pull it out of the pot, we're just going to shake it. And
what color did you use for the mane?
Oh, the mane is heavy sienna. It is a reddish brown. We're going to take our wash, this is like our earth shade. We're going to dip our brush in, pull the excess off, put this in a safe spot where we don't knock it over.
Oh, you're good. I just can't spell sienna.
Oh, it's
Oh, it's on there. Okay.
S.
Yeah. That's alright.
Yeah. And we're going to get everything with this wash. And let it pool Let it do its thing. Don't be afraid of it. I guess you can use the flesh wash that came with the kit if you kind of want a more reddish Manticore versus a yellow, because the sepia wash is more of a yellow base brown, and the flesh wash is more kind of like the color of the tan, it almost seems. Get that around his body. You can see, for all us seasoned veterans, that the wash is starting to pick out all the details. I usually like to just work one side at a time. It's just a thing. Everybody's got their thing. Top of the wing, you can actually see that he's got all these like little veins in his wing now. Down the arm. Don't worry about being too heavy in like the crevices, like in between his wings on his back. That's going to be naturally darker anyway. And we'll clean up any like pools or puddles. Now if you are worried about tide pools, which is just like the puddles of the wash, just go ahead and wick your brush again through it when there isn't too much wash on your brush, and that'll clean that out. Oh god, that was still wet. That's okay. We'll touch that up real quick. Man, we really made that first coat of paint last. There we go. So we'll just ignore the tail for the time being since it's still drying. We'll get the other side of the body. Once again, ignoring the tail, although this side seemed to have been a little bit safer. Don't forget to get the underside of them. That's always very easy to forget, and then you'll be almost done with your mini and realize that the inside of his legs are still flat yellow. Okay, underneath that paw, that leg. And let me tell you, there is nothing worse than realizing you forgot to do the inside of the legs when you think you're almost done. I've done it. His hands. He's going to start to look really dark, and that's okay. We're going to bring the color back. We're going to bring the brightness back up on him. So he's not going to just be all dingy. But you know, if you were painting him and you had your game later in the evening and you needed him to be ready for the table, this would be doing the base coat and the wash, and then maybe picking out his eyes and doing his mouth. He would be ready for your table at this point. Which is why washes are great for when you're just painting to get something onto the table. And you know, then you pick them back up and you keep working at them later. I'm just going to wick away some places where it's pooling. I'm going to check that. That seems to be doing a little bit better, so now maybe we can do the tail. Start with the underside though. Yeah, there we go. We must have just caught like a wet pool of paint in a crevice. Yep, that's exactly what we did because it just happened again. So we'll ignore those spikes for now. Keep working our way up the tail. And getting it onto the spikes itself is fine because that's going to kind of make the bone look older and more dirty. Right, so we don't want his tail to look like clean new bone. I mean, he's got all these spikes sticking out. He probably when he's not in attack mode, he's dragging it across the floor. So the bone's going to be pretty dirty. Alright, and now we deviate. So, we got our wash, and our wash is still wet in most of the areas. I can see along at least this part of the body, it's already dried, so that's where we'll start next. We're going to work into some shading. So, we're going to do a little bit of a mix. I'm going to actually use what I have left of my heavy sienna in that well. And I'm going to take heavy ochre, so we're doing a mix of heavy ochre and heavy sienna. I'm going to get as much of this on my brush as I can. Dab it in, take a little bit more, dab it in. Then I'm going to do 2 drops of water. We're going to mix it.
And before you think, you want to do a recap of what you've done?
Yeah.
Yep.
And put a little bit more water in that. Another 2 drops. There we go. That looks great. So what we've done so far on our Manticore is we've done a base coat on his body of heavy ochre. The mane is based in heavy sienna. The face and the underside of the paws are done in the heavy skin tone. His wings are base coated in tan, and his bone, spikes, and claws and teeth are done in bone white. And then we took our sepia wash and we went over everything on him with it. And now we're going to move into shading. So I just took 2 brushfuls of the heavy ochre and I mixed it into my remaining heavy sienna. Now it's not a science, so just eyeball it. But what you're looking for is something like this color. You want it to be darker than the way that his body is currently looking right now, but you don't want it to be black.
You can look at that camera.
Oh, okay. My director. So once we have our color mixed, and we like the consistency of it, and by the consistency I mean the thinness, so I'm looking at it on my fingernail, and it's just how I want it. It's not overly thick, but it's not so thin that it's just going to be an invisible line. We're going to pick out his legs where they meet the body, so right here, where the wings meet the body. So we're going to just trace underneath it like that. We're going to get his arm right here where it's up against the body. And we'll get right here in the shoulder and around the mane. So my guy, he's got a little bit of a dark spot on the shoulder because I messed up and got brown everywhere. But then what we're also going to do is we're going to kind of pick out where all the bends in his arm are. And we'll get his little toesies. Get kind of in between there, and it's okay to come down into the lining color. And we'll get under his stomach, because naturally our light source is up above, so underneath is going to be dark. And you kind of want to spread the paint out a little bit. And then we'll do the same thing with his other leg. So right here in this bend, we'll put some of our darker paint. We'll get right along here. It's not going to look like much. This is pretty close to his body, but it's going to do just enough to give us some contrast when we do our highlights. And contrast is really what makes miniatures pop, because they're so small. So when you can get bright light colors next to darker, more muted tones, that's contrast, and that makes them pop. And then we'll get all under here. Split his legs. We'll get here. So anywhere where you see a divot, a muscle, you want to go underneath it with this color. I'm just going to do around these spikes on the tail. And then, like I said earlier, I'm going to just count it done with the wash, because this is a nightmare unless you're doing this for a contest. I let the wash stay heavy, so it's going to do everything for us. And we'll get right here, you see he's got this big dip in his wing right there in that joint. We'll trace the muscle. We'll trace this part of the muscle. That's pretty good right there with what that wash did, so I'm not going to touch it. We'll flip him over. He's mostly dry on this side. We'll get this wing a little bit. I just want them to match a little bit better. I did one way and one the other. Whoops, there we go. So, and then coming in here in the wing, we're just really going to lay on our shading color. And we'll touch it up a little bit with the highlight to bring it back a little bit, but in between here, along with the tail, it's going to be in shadow. And then you can pick out, he's got this cool muscle texture right here. If you want to just put your shadow color there. And we'll start on his other side. So we'll do the same thing. We'll trace where the wing meets the body. Where the leg comes down, where the arm attaches. Get underneath his armpit. Get around his mane. Get his belly. And then we'll get these little crevices in his arm. We'll get along the shoulder blade too, because he's got this wing half bent over him. Get his hand. You see, I'm just picking out all the crevices. And this is generally, this part of shading is called lining. Which usually you would do in a much darker color, but they didn't give us a much darker color to use. And I'm actually going to get inside of his paws with this, because this is also a nice shading color for the face. Then we'll get in there. We just kind of want to make sure for the underside of this wing that we do stay kind of dark. I'll come up here. We'll come back once that dries with this color. And then we'll get in between the wings. So we'll do the same thing. We'll trace the mane, trace the wing. Great. And then, so that's our body shading. You should be able to notice more definition in the like the shadows, so you can actually now see where the wings and the legs have attached to the creature. So next we're going to take our heavy sienna. We're only going to take a little bit of it because it's precious. This is the darkest color that they gave us, so it's in a lot of stuff. Just going to take a little bit and then a brush full of water. Maybe another brush full of water. Great. So we're going to use this color to do the same thing that we did with the body, but with the wings. So we're going to just use it and we're going to just trace all the knuckle. So we're just going to go along the joints of the arm. All the way down to the tip of the wing. And it's okay if you get a little bit thick, and actually you can be a little bit thick here in these corners with it. My paint's still a little bit too thick for me, but I like the nice strong bold lines that I'm getting, so I'm not going to be too worried about it. This kind of shading is also great for building up brush control, which good brush control makes the painter. And it's just something that you can never rush too. It's just something that develops over time. So I might be making it look easy as I'm tracing stuff, and you might be like having a hard time with it. That's okay. I just had some time to build up my brush control is all. I'm also kind of using the bone that's there to help guide my brush as well. We're going to do this on both sides for both wings. And you can see that now this wing is really defined with its webbing, which is what we want. There. It's a little bit melted, which is to be expected. So, you know, if like I'm missing part of the bone right here, if you are too, just feel it out. Just look at the direction that it's moving and put your line. They're quiet.
They are right now.
They're engaged.
So we can ask them if a few people are using the colors out of there.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody using anything else? We can ask them that.
Okay, yeah. So I would take a different approach with this. I actually had to watch the video to figure out how they used the colors, because they only give you enough paint for how they used it. Is anybody else using a different approach, using different paints, different colors? What are you doing with your Manticore that's different? Because obviously this is my style of painting, but it could be vastly different to yours, and you may not like how I'm doing it. So how are you painting your Manticore tonight? And what paint are you using?
And there's still people on.
Hey. Now with lining, like I said, my paint's still a little bit too thick. If I was doing this as a display piece, I would be using much thinner paint and going against the direction. So for these long bones, I would be actually going side to side rather than tracing straight down. And what that does is that helps it look more like a natural shadow rather than an outline. But we're gonna hit this up later to kind of try and help it all come together. And when it's on your table and you're standing up over it, you kind of want that definition. You want stuff to stick out on it. And then we'll get underneath all of these knuckles. You were laughing. Did somebody say something?
Oh, yeah.
What?
So, you got this dude online right now saying, I'm using the M-Swick methodology. Wonder who that is.
This is, so the way that I'm painting, this is very similar to how I approach, I call them my display pieces. They're pieces that I take about a week to paint. This is just kind of a high-speed version of it. Which is, it's also quite good for tabletop. You just kind of end up with more of a cartoon style paint job when you do it quick. Which looks good on the table because it really brings the mini to life with all the shadows.
And do you know who Talon is?
Talon.
Talon for life, lifeable. But he or she, this person just wrote in saying, still waiting on drying.
Oh no.
Will wash with the flesh shade.
Ooh. Let me know how that works, 'cause I haven't even opened up my flesh shade.
That's Keith. Hey, Keith.
I feel like the flesh shade would be really good on the face and the wings. Oh my god. Let me know how it works on the ochre. I'm curious.
And then Abby, is anyone else finding the Vallejo paint taking longer to dry than other paints?
Yes. 100%. This paint is made for wet blending. I can already tell. Because it's a thicker paint too, which is what you want for wet blending. That's why I have to keep watering it down so much. So, looking down at the top, you can see some happily defined knuckles and wings. So our next bit of shading that we're going to do is our face. Oh god, with more sienna. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of brush up what I've already used. I'm going to bring it on over to my heavy skin tone. We're going to mix it up. Come on. Add some water. Now we're going to do the face.
Sunny Girl said Margaret's display pieces are amazing.
Who's that?
Abby.
Oh, that's Abby. Thanks, Abby. But Abby can tell you that I'm a little bit slow. So most of his face is already pretty good with that wash that we did. But we're going to just kind of hit in between here, under his mouth. And this is another one where you're not really going to notice a whole lot, but we're going to notice it more once we start highlighting. We're going to get right here in this crevice. And then the big important thing is we're going to do the entire area where the eyes are located. So that's all the way up to his nose and then back underneath here. And so then what that will do is that will help shade the area. Now I'm looking at mine and I want a little bit more sienna in it. It's a little bit too similar still to the flesh tone. So I'm just going to dip my brush in. Yeah, there we go. You could almost even really go straight up heavy sienna with this color, but when you use a color, when you use the same color as part of the shading that was in your base coat, it really helps those layers come together. So this color looks like it would be part of his face because it's already got the same color of his face built into it. Oh yeah, it's a lot better. I'm gonna get under his cheeks. Get the eyes again. Oh, except they're not drying. That's gonna be that's gonna be our thing of the night. But we're gonna start moving away from that being an issue, I feel. And then we're gonna do around the mane. Because it would be darker here anyway. And then don't worry, we are not shading the mane. We will only be doing some highlights with it. Goodness.
And of course I realize it's hard to chat when you have a paintbrush and a mini in your hand.
Yeah. That's why everybody's quiet.
Yeah,
They're
right?
trying to keep up. Sorry if I'm going so fast. I'm just trying not to... Oh, I lost my stopwatch, so now I don't know how long I've been going.
I just realized that. Like, that makes sense. And it's 7:09, so you're
Oh, we're doing good. We're almost... This is the last part of the shading, so we're doing pretty good.
Another recap then?
Yep. So while that's drying... I'm waiting for this eye to dry so I can put the new color on it. So while I'm waiting for that to dry, since this was our last step for shading, what we did the whole mini in the sepia wash to kind of help out all the small stuff, so like the ribbing in the wings, the little bit of texture on the body, the mane, the smaller crevices on the face. That's all the sepia wash. For the wing, we lined it, or did our kind of like picking out of the bone in heavy sienna. And then for the body, we mixed heavy ochre and heavy sienna to get into all the joints and where everything connected to the body. And then for his face, we did heavy sienna and heavy skin tone. Is that dry yet? It's almost there. I'll try it again. Yeah, there we go. So now it's stuck. And the reason why we do the eyes is because when we go to put our eye color in, when we get to that dreaded step of doing the eyes, having a darker background against the eyes make them pop more. And it's always, and I mean, when you look at his brow, it's going to be heavily shaded there anyway. So if you have like a straight up dark brown, that would go great there as well. If you aren't using these paints. So now we're going to get into the highlights. And if you can see my cheat sheet, it says the first round. We're going to do 2 sets of highlights, 1 set of shading, 2 sets of highlights. So we're going to do the wings first. And we're going to use dwarf skin. So we're going to take that. We're going to take a nice heap of it. And remember, I'm not dry brushing because they didn't include a brush that's good for dry brushing. So it's a great opportunity to do some other stuff. So I'm going to add 1, 2, 3, 4 drops of water. This paint is so thick. And I only use this flat brush to base coat just to save on some time. because it would take a long time to base coat it with this brush. So we're going to get that up on our small brush. Wow, that still needs more water. Do another 3 drops. We don't want this to be so heavy. We want it to be thinner so that it has some transparency. I'm just going to leave that in the water. And I use my nail because I can see the paint go from my nail across the white. That's a little bit better. It doesn't really seem to go transparent, it just seems to kind of lose color. So we'll just work with it. So what we're going to do, I'm going to start with the big part. We're going to, while working in a downward stroke, kind of go up, come down, and get in between. And you want to just keep wicking off the wing in the same direction. And it's okay if you go over your lining with this, because that's just going to help it blend in more. So see, I completely lost control and went completely over my line. That's fine. And then for like these more narrow ones, don't go all the way up. Leave a little bit of darkness up towards the peak of the webbing. And I'm going to come back down here and I'm going to add more. And what I'm doing with my brush is I'm painting with its side. So you can kind of see what I'm doing here. So this is kind of like side brushing, which is similar to dry brushing, but you want wet paint for it. You don't want to take all the paint out of your brush. And then for this one, we're going to come up here and we're going to work down at an angle like this, because the wing kind of starts to fold. And then we're going to leave it dark in here. We're going to leave it as just a tan color. So we'll do the same thing for this wing. Start over here. And just kind of get up in there a little bit. This one's a little awkward because of the angle of the wing. Come on down in here. And with this one, because it's so spread out, you do want to go up higher. Do some of that side brushing action. You can see how it's picking out the veins a little bit that are running through the wing. And because this is kind of the top of the wing and it's flat, we're going to let there be a lot of highlight on it. And then we're going to do the same thing like we did on this side, except it's going to be a little bit more gradual. We're going to start pretty heavy towards here, and then we're going to go down at that angle. And then we're going to leave this little bit alone. And then for this little bit of webbing right here, we'll just get the very edge of it. And actually, if your wing has definition, like this side didn't, but this side does, if you've got these little bumps, go ahead and just pick those out. like how I'm doing. Just get a couple, like a stroke or two on them. Then for the underside of the wing, you kind of want to look at it like this. So I can see part of the underside of this wing, and I can see a little bit of the webbing right here. So that's where I'm going to put my highlight. We're not going to be overly concerned with this part of the wing. So I got to check again, what part can I see? And that's not a, oh, what part are the players not going to see? That's a, if I'm the light source, or I'm thinking of the light source as being all around, what part of the wing is visible that would be getting hit by that light source. If you want to do this with all of the webbing, go right ahead. I tend to do that with my display pieces. I paint in an ambient sort, and I'll go ahead and paint everything as if the light is hitting it, because I like to really show off the model that way. I'm going to get right in here, but we're not going to go too low. Do you know what? We'll do a little bit. Well, yeah, no, that's good. Then we'll get this side. And we can go up all the way, even though his wing's kind of covering it. We'll get the edge. Alright, so there's our first highlight. Oh, I lied. We have to get his knuckles in the top of those bones. So, I'm going to think of this after the stream is done. For the bone of the wings, if anybody in chat wants to tell me what this word is, that'd be super cool. We're going to pick out the knuckles, kind of like how we picked out their shadow, but then we're also going to get the top of the bone.
Little delayed reaction, but Vallejo paints wet blending whether you want to or not.
Yeah. But you know, it's like every paint company has their gimmick, and this is Vallejo's, which is great. And that's great for them because a lot of people paint through wet blending. That's how they get their blends. So this paint's perfect for them. For me, I paint in layers, and then I do a trick to make it all blend together. And Reaper paint is perfect for that kind of technique, because I actually learned that technique from watching the woman who made the paint line. She designed it specifically to work that way.
Yeah, Keith just said, yeah, he wished he knew how wet they were before thinning.
Yeah.
Out loud.
Because I wanted to save up as much paint as I could, I also didn't test them beforehand, and I've never worked with Vallejo, so I'm pretty sure a lot of us are having this experience together of working with Vallejo for the first time. But you've got to thin them. You know, it's like, it's kind of a double-edged sword. Because look at, this paint has 5 drops of water in it, and it's still extremely thick and heavy.
The bones of a bat's wings are essentially the same as human finger bones.
Alright, so finger bones. That's what we'll call them instead of the bone things. Nope. Just along there. This dwarf, what is this dwarf skin? Is a really nice color. I really like the color a lot. Though I did match them to Reaper paint, so that might be why I like them. They're just a little bit more vibrant. And then we're going to check. So I can already see I need to get the sides and just a little bit of the finger bone right there under his wing. So look at the sides, get the sides, and get the sides. One trick, if you are more of a single light source kind of painter, is to take your miniature, put it on the table, and then take a flashlight and hold that flashlight in the direction of the light source and then take a picture, which is a really nice trick. And I think because I think in that way, that's why I paint in the ambient light style. Because if I don't have the reference photo for the shadows, I'm like, oh my god, paint every surface.
Keith says he's gonna try. He thinks he's gonna try the Tesseract glow on the eyes.
Oh, that's the new Citadel color.
Yes.
Yeah. Does that actually glow in the dark?
So about that. No, you don't charge it under a light, which I thought. My apologies, if they can hear me. But it gives the glow effect without any other lighting.
That's still really cool.
But someone did put it under black light, and it looked pretty cool.
So that will do it for our first round of wing highlights. Next, we're going to move on to the body. I just scooped out some Filthy Brown, which is very similar to Heavy Ochre. This is Filthy Brown, and this is Heavy Ochre. They are very similar in color, so I'm not too worried about the philosophy of having a similar type of color in your highlight. The wings I'm not too worried about because they really needed something to make them pop. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at my off-white to see how it's doing today. Pasty. Let's see if we can save it. So I'm going to put 2 drops of water in there. And I'm going to take the back side of my brush Yeah, there we go. Now it's starting to smooth out and settle down. Yummy. And I'm going to make sure I don't have yellow on my brush because that would be terrible to get into my pot of white paint. I'm just going to kind of take half a scoopful, maybe that much. I'm going to put some water in there, 2, 3, 4, 5. And the reason why I'm going to add white to this color is because of how similar it is to our base color. I was worried that we wouldn't see too much of it because the body's already quite subtle with our subtle shadows and the sepia wash on top of the yellow. So this will at least just give us a little bit more brightness to really kind of make it pop. Take our one brush. Let's just see how that's doing. Oh my god. I work with really thin paints, so it's been a while since I've had a thick paint. Alright. There we go. That should be good now. Dirty paint water is not good for the stream. So, and then we're going to do the opposite of what we did with our shadows, and we're going to pick out the raised areas of the body. So, right here along the stomach. God, this paint is so thick. That's okay. We'll call it cell shading.
I love this water pot.
Right? It's a pizza dungeon.
Put that right here. There we go.
That's my favorite water cup. We'll get a shoulder right here. Okay, now the paint's starting to behave, now that we're a couple of brush strokes in.
We'll tell Reaper get a little product placement.
That. I already told them I was packing up the Pizza Dungeon cup. We'll get right here, even though on my model it's very dark. That's not actually a shadow, that was just me being messy. We'll get right here. And then for his arm, we're going to do what I was talking about earlier, where if I was doing this for display, I wouldn't be painting in the same direction as the grain, so to say, so the longest moving spot. So with his leg, I'm not going to paint up and down. I'm actually going to go side to side. So I'm just going to kind of wick the paint downwards. And that's just because this is such a large, prominent surface. And I'm just going to do the part that's leaning out towards me. I'm not going to go and do the inside. And then I'm going to just pick out the knuckles on his toes. If you can see them, they are a little bit hard to see, but they're definitely there. And then we're going to do the same thing here. He's got this nice big broad hip, so we're going to do the same thing where we go side to side with our paint. He does have a little bit of a dip right there. He's got some weird muscle anatomy going on. And then as we come down the hip, we're going to move more towards the knee with our strokes. Get the knee, we'll come down, and if you find that your paint is pooling in a weird spot, then go back over and just brush the opposite way to spread it out. And we'll get down here, and now we'll pick out this part of his ankle. What time did we start? 6?
Yep.
How am I doing?
Oh, you're doing great.
Are you sure?
Yeah. I mean, we said 6 to 8. If it goes over a little bit.
Yeah, we might go over a little bit. To be fair, he is a large creature. He's not quite dragon large, but we'll get just the base of his tail with this too. We'll do that same thing where we're going side to side, just up until it just starts to become a pain in the butt to do. We'll get a little bit right here. And then we'll pick out the hip right here. Come down. And because I can still see a little bit of his leg right here, we're just going to do a little bit of a highlight. We'll get base of the tail here. See, now mine's going to be weird. I put way too much paint. If you put too much paint on it, go ahead, dip your brush in the water and run it through. This is also a technique known as feathering, where you put down a nice glob of paint and then you take a wet brush and you run it through it with the water still on it. Alright, and then we're going to do the same thing with his other leg. This one's going to be a little bit different because of that wing. So we're going to get this muscle right here. And we're going to get his lower knee. We'll get right here too. We'll connect the highlight. And then we'll come down his leg. Mountain over, back down. Pick out that bone. Get some of his foot. You can still see some of his foot. Now, I gotta look at him because I've been looking at him like this, but now I need to look at him like this to see what that wing is really covering, and it's covering a majority of his chest and his shoulder. So all that's really coming out is this part of his arm. So that's what we're gonna highlight. Just get the tip of this muscle.
We have someone that's behind. He's saying, is the base coat of the claws, teeth, and spikes bone white or off white?
Bone white.
Bone white.
And just so you know, I haven't done my claws. My teeth I kind of did, and then I decided why change my habits now. I'm gonna just kind of, oh, of course that dried. Yeah, it's fine. Alright, so there's our body. And it's okay. It's gonna look splotchy. That's all part of the technique. So, really? Okay. And we're gonna go back to our dwarf skin, which was this orangey color, which is already pre-thinned, and we're gonna pick out his face. So we're gonna use dwarf skin to highlight the rises and ridges on his face. So we're definitely gonna do around his eye. We're gonna get his nose, his little nose, big scary Manticore. We're gonna get, you know, really pick out the rise of the wrinkles. And the way that you want to paint, you want to start in and work your way out. And the reason with that is because wherever you end your brush stroke, there will be the most paint. So wherever you start it, there will be the least paint. So it'll look like a natural transition of the shadows if you paint away from where the shadows are the deepest. So we'll do it here. And you know, if you're having a hard time with it, just make it up. Maybe he doesn't have a wrinkle there. Skip it. Or maybe that wrinkle's bigger. And we're gonna get just the tip of his chin. And we're gonna get his bottom lip. Just the bottom lip. See, and that's why I do teeth last. I'm going to take this, get the paint off, do a wick. I'm just going to clean out some of that paint that got in there. And then we'll go ahead, we'll get some of his forehead. So we'll start with this wrinkle. Come down. We'll do the same one on the other side, keep it nice and symmetrical. He's gonna look funny. And if he looks funny, then you're doing it right. And then we're also gonna just get the pads of his feet. So remember that we did the underside in the same base coat color as his face. So what I'm doing is I'm taking my brush and I'm brushing straight down away from the middle of the paw on the underside. And I'm going to go right ahead and do the same thing on this paw, but on the side, as well as over here. We're going to ignore that paw because that paw is very much in the shadows. So, there's your skin tone highlights, and that's that for the first round of highlight. So, just to recap for the highlights, we did dwarf skin for the wings, the face, and the paws. We did a mix of off-white and filthy brown for his body. And that's it. Real easy step. So now we're going to go into final highlights. First we're going to do the wings in the cadmium skin. It's this light, very peachy color. Oh, which also ended up being a little bit chunky. So we're just going to do 2 drops of paint. Take our beat up brush. There we go. Now it's nice and smooth. Alright, then we're going to scoop it on out. We're actually going to use this color for the wings and the face. So it's like we're following the same pattern as last time where we were using a similar color. Add some more water. That's about 8 drops of water this time. As you go up in your layers, you want thinner paint. Alright, so we did kind of a triangle last time with the webbing. We're kind of keeping the same idea. We're starting around here and wicking down. And you know, if it doesn't want to go in a spot, don't force it. Just leave it. That'll add some texture. So like he's got all these big divots that the paint won't go into when I do my initial strokes. So I'm just going to leave it alone. And I'm just going to get this wing. And then the same thing like how when we highlighted this part, we're just going to get the edge as we work our way down. And we're only going to do this part on the top of the wings. We aren't going to do this on the underside of the wings. We're just going to do the edge here. Get it here. And then same thing. If these in-between spots are really bugging you, you can go ahead and pick them out. I'm not going to, but you feel free to. You go right ahead, you do you. And I'm just going to get the very edge of this part of the webbing. Alright, and now we'll get the knuckles, or the finger bones. We're just going to pick out the very tops of the finger bones. We're not going to do the long bones. And the reason being, we want there to be a little bit of a difference in this part of the miniature. If we did the long bones with this too, they wouldn't stand apart from each other, the knuckles from the bone. Great. So there's our wings. And then we're straight to it while our paint is nice and mixed. So we're going to work part way away from where the brow starts. We're going to get just the tip of his nose, the middle of his bottom lip, and the middle of his chin. And we can get just the edge of his cheeks. Let's get right here on his head too. Why not? Yeah. Look at his paws. Do his paws need another round of highlight? Yeah, you know, they could use it on the side. So we'll just get it right here. A little bit of lots of little tiny strokes, just to lighten up the area. We'll get his finger right here. We'll get the inside right here. Get the fingers just a touch. And just lighten up the bottom of his palm. Pale yellow. Alright, next we'll do the body. We're just going to use straight up pale yellow. Oh, that's great. That one doesn't need water. It's a nice, I like this yellow a lot. I'm going to add some water to it. Running out of well space. Glad I brought my other well. I brought a backup well palette. If you're running into this problem, you do have 3 more wells up here, and you've got where the cup was, so that might just be enough. Alright, so the wise man will notice that I never highlighted this part of his wing, which is fine. We'll just get that with the highest highlight, which would have overshadowed it anyway. So with our highest highlight, we're going to go ahead and we're going to just kind of fill in the middle of all of our other highlights. And if your pale yellow is looking darker than your previous highlight, go ahead and just add some more of that off-white to it. Mine's kind of borderline, like maybe I should have added some, but I'm just going to roll with it. We're just going to get in the middles. Trace the bone. Trace the bone. Get the paw. Get the base of the tail. You know, I've got this part right here. I'm going to go ahead because I can easily pick it out. We're going to come on this side, start working our way up, get the hip. Start working on the other hip. We're not going to do the underside of his tail with our last highlight. Then we're going to come down the leg. Pick out just the side of that foot. And then we're going to remember that this wing is covering up most of this arm, so we're just going to get his hand. And this edge of the shoulder. And then I'm going to go through and I'm going to pick out the top of the wings right here. So we'll go here. Come down and get these interesting muscle textures. Do the same thing on the other side. And then just a little bit down this side, the tail is covering up most of this part of the wing. For the mane, we're just going to take some tan. Say off-white or bone white? No, I said bone white. So I still can see that my tan is still active. It's not completely dried yet in that well. So I'm just going to take a scoop of the bone white. I'm going to just run it in there. I'm going to put some water. And then what we're going to do for his mane is we're only going to pick out key spots. We're not going to get every single individual strand, but we're going to get right here around his face. And you don't need to pick out the strands. You can just go ahead, take the side of your brush, and just brush up away from the face. And for the most part, that will pick up the strands. And yes, it's going to look quite pink, but that's okay. I think I just grabbed the wrong color. That's okay, it's pretty similar. If you grab the wrong color like I do often, you can just go right back on over it. And then what we'll do, we'll just grab a couple of the larger areas. We're not going to get so much into this side because his arm is there. We'll just get right about there, and we're going to ignore the underside. So leave that. If you ended up getting very splotchy like I had in some spots, go ahead, get some water, put it on, and just work it away. Alright, and then we're going to take our off-white. Gotta get this brush clean because it's going back into a white pot. We're going to pick out all the spikes again. Lucky us. Lots and lots of little spikes. Get a little bit of a highlight. So let's start with his mane. Just getting the very edges of them. Not going all the way down to the base. Keep picking them out. That's pretty good. And then we'll tackle his tail. Then I'm going to take some water because this is a little bit too much for me. I'm just going to kind of go over what I've done, and then I'm going to take all the excess off my brush. I'm going to put it in the crevices to suck up all the paint because I don't want paint in my crevices. And then we'll get some more. We'll get the edge of these thorns. Moving up. Only get the ones that you can see. Don't worry about the ones underneath the tail. Those would be in shadow anyway. And if you've missed some, it's alright. It's not the end of the world. There's a lot of them here. And then we're going to get his big spikes. I like to imagine that he can shoot these. They just look like little launching spikes. I don't know a whole lot about manticores. They're not dragons. Or they're part dragon. I actually always thought manticores had scorpion tails, and I kind of dig this one with the barbed tail. Alright, so like I said, we're only worrying about the ones that we can see. We don't necessarily care about these lower ones. They would be in the shadows anyway, and they wouldn't be as noticeable as the others. We'll get the little claws on his wings. Only get the front of them. His teeth. Just do like a little dab on each tooth. Dab or two is all it needs. Pretty sure Manticores don't go to the dentist. I just thought of something. We're going to take our heavy sienna shadow mix from the flesh tone. So this was the flesh tone that was mostly heavy sienna. And we're just going to get in his mouth.
Supposedly they do shoot them from their tail.
Oh. God. This guy's a porcupine. They left porcupine out of what this thing is made up of.
Even though technically porcupines can't shoot their quills.
Oh, that's true. Well, they can slap them out of their tail.
Yeah,
I'm just taking some of the bone white mixture, and I'm now just picking out his claws, because then we'll go through with our off-white and just hit him with a highlight. So this is what I always do. I always do bone and claws last, because I like to get paint all over them, because they're so little. I don't want to have to be worrying about, oh my god, I just painted over the claws again. So I usually just get them last. I like that there's some knowledge in the chat about manticores. I obviously didn't look them up. And we'll go through, we'll just get the tips of the claws with the off-white. Alright, flip the page. So, for our final highlights, we did the body with pale yellow. We did the wings and the face and the paws with cadmium skin. We did the spikes, the teeth and the claws with off-white, and the mane was a mix of tan and bone white. Flip the page. Okay. So next, we get into the fun stuff. A little bit of pizzazz. So we can actually use, because it's so close to heavy sienna, and that saves us the heavy sienna for the base, we're just going to go ahead and keep using this color that we mixed for our face shadows, which was the heavy sienna and the heavy skin tone. We're going to go ahead, check it, make sure it's still got some wet to it. Add a little bit more water. And then we're going to go ahead, so this is going to be for the edge of the wings. So I wanted to add more water because we do want this to be rather translucent. And we're going to get the whole edge of the wing with this. And this is optional. So now we're just kind of adding more to the miniature. So if you like your wings the way they are, skip this. Don't do this. Don't do something you don't want to do to your mini. Get the underside. And yeah, I'm going to do the whole wing, just to kind of help get it along the edge of the wing, because I kind of flick my brush off the wing. You can probably even hear it. It's a really stiff brush. And you could see, because of how thin my paint was, it's just kind of made the edge of the wing more interesting rather than adding a whole nother color. But that's the trick, is to keep the paint thin with it so that it doesn't so much overpower everything else that's underneath it. Just get the edge here, get the edge here. And then get the edge in here. And this will actually kind of help make the very inside look more interesting if you really kind of moving it all over the place. And we'll get the insides.
Just heads up.
Oh, okay. We're almost done. I think like maybe my guess is it's gonna be like maybe 8:35 if that's okay.
Sounds good.
And then another optional thing you can do is stripes on the legs. In the Monster Manual, that guy has stripes on his legs. So if you wanted to do a little bit of freehand, do 2 drops of water with 1 brush full of paint. And if you have shaky hands, this is going to be great for it, because we want pretty inconsistent stripes. So I'm just kind of shaking my brush back and forth as I'm going across the thigh. Get his arm. And I'm staying out of my heavy shadows when I do this. So I'm only staying up towards above the knee and the elbow on him. I think that looks better. If I don't like the look of it going all the way down, but that's just my personal preference. If you want a Manticore that's more tiger than lion, you go all the way down. How many stripes did I do on that side? 3, so I gotta do 3 on this side. This one wasn't very, there we go. This one could prove to be kind of difficult. Just do your best. I'm stopping where the heavy shading starts. And I'm going in a diagonal fashion because his arm is raised. So I only put 2 on that one, so I'm only going to do 2 there. So now he's got some fancy stripes. And then his eyes. Oh goodness, here we go. So, eyes are super scary. We all hate them. We all love to hate them. His aren't too bad though. You've got a lot of forgiveness with his eyes. You could do the dot, or you could go in most of this depression. I'm going to go through most of the depression to give myself more room to work. So I'm going to start here. And you see, it's just the same way that we were highlighting earlier. I'm doing it in the middle rather than trying to fill it all in. And watch, this side's going to be a mess. The second side's always a mess. Yeah, it's not that great. But there we go. Oh God. And we're going to take our heavy sienna, and we're going to use that for a pupil. So you want to look at the miniature straight on when you're doing the pupil, because if you're looking at it, or you want to look at it either straight on so it can look straight on back at you, or if you want to have your miniature looking off into the distance, hold it in that angle that it would be looking, and then do your pupils. So I'm going to do mine straight on, and I'm just going to do lines. Give him some cat eyes. And the beauty of it is that the sienna is almost the same color as the shading we did around it. So you can actually overshoot your line a little bit and you won't be able to see it. So there we go. And then, so as I've been saying, the splotchiness is all part of the grand plan, and that's true. So what the finishing touch for this style is called glazing, and what glazing is taking what's essentially almost dirty paint water and going back over everything in your base color to help all of the layers kind of blend together. So I'm going to take a brush full of the ochre, which was the heavy ochre, which was our base color for the body, and I'm going to flood it. Get the excess paint off. You do not want it. So when we take a look at this, you can see, maybe you can see, this may not be a great color. Oh, I can go over the pink. So you can see over the nail, it's barely there. I can see the white of my nail and the pink of my nail perfectly, but there's a yellow tint to it. That's what we want. So then I'm going to take my basing brush, going to load it up with the glaze, and we're going to hit everything. Well, we're going to hit everything on the body. And we do not want this to pool. So go at a section at a time. If you see it pooling, take the paint off your brush and dab it. Because at this point we have essentially broken the paint, which means that it is now falling out of solution. And if you let it dry in pools like how you would a wash, you'll get rings, basically. You'll get tide marks. So I'm just going to roll my brush, going to pick it out. We're going to take our dirty paint water, get this part of the leg. And what you should see, mine's not going to be like top quality, but you should start to notice that all of a sudden everything kind of pulls together. Everything looks like it belongs where it should be, and that everything is a natural highlight and shadow. And that's because it's all getting this tint from the base coat, which is kind of pulling it back to that original color. And doing this over our freehand stripes will make those stripes look more like they belong with that body, like they're part of it, not just something that got put on it. We're not going to worry about this part of the tail, mostly because of all of the spikes. You can, if you want. I would suggest doing it with the smaller brush and just taking your time. I am going to, however, hit right back here. Now sometimes you need to do 2 layers with the glaze. You usually need to do 2, maybe even 3 layers. So I'm going to try to do a second layer. Mine's not drying yet because this is the theme of the night. So I'm just wicking it out. Don't want it to dry in the crevices. Gonna get some more, get the excess off. now you can really see that these highlights are becoming part of the model. So now we're going to move on to our next one. We're going to have to use the top for. We're going to do tan for the wings. Again, we're going to just take a brush full of paint. We're going to flood it. And then we're going to check it. Checking it is very important because you do not want this to be so thick that it cancels out everything you've done. So see, this is still too thick. There we go. That's much better. I can still just see the white of my nail through it. So if we take off enough of the excess, we should be fine. So we're going to dip it in, pull it back. Yeah. And then same thing that we were doing with the body. Just going to paint over everything on the wings with it. Don't forget about those finger bones. Get the undersides real quick. You don't have to be neat with it on the wings. See, I had a little bit too much paint there. I didn't get enough off my brush. So we're going to have to go back with an empty brush load and wick it off. And I take a look at it. I can tell that the first wing I did could use another layer. This one's actually fine. It's really this one panel, and I'm not going to mess around with it too much. I will give up. We're going to take our heavy skin tone and make a glaze out of that for the face. Where is it? And then we'll do one for the mane, and then just get the part where we highlighted. So that'll be a little one that's a little bit more control. So this is the heavy skin tone. We're going to just do the face real quick so that all of that blends in. And we're going to use our smaller brush again. So always check it. Make sure it's good. Yep, this one's good. So I'm going to just take the load that I have. Just going to go over all the highlights. And we're going to be careful with the eyes. We're not going to get too close to them. You want to go over the shaded stuff too, because you don't want to only go over the highlights. It's important that you get all of it with the glaze, or else it's going to look a little funny. I'm working on my second layer. And I'm going to take the rest of the paint off, and I'm just going to pick it up a little bit. There we go. His paws actually look pretty good. I don't think they need the glazing. They're blending in well enough on their own, so we're not going to go and mess around with them. because they're just sticking out just enough that they look good. And then I want to hit these bigger spikes just because they are a little bit too white. So I'm going to see what I can almost save from my dried out bone white well. Take a little bit more paint. Yep, perfect. And then we're just going to wick over it. You know, just to kind of bring that pure white down just a smidge. We're just going to do it on the big ones because they're the flashy piece. If you want to hit all of them, hit all of them. I'm not going to. So there. What time is it?
It is 8:19.
Oh. We can do the base real quick. I can't believe I didn't run out of that heavy sienna. So, I don't know what color was in that well. Oh, that's heavy sienna right here. So, I'm going to soak up some of this heavy sienna. Now we're going to do the base. We're going to base coat it in the brown. Be careful when you get close to your miniature. Sometimes I like to give myself a wide berth. I'll do like all of the middle with the big brush, and then I'll get the rest that's closer to the mini with a smaller brush. Especially when I'm painting quick like this. Get all of it. Slow down a little bit. There you go. Get the front. Don't forget about the front of the base. I'm just going to try, yes. You can try to get lucky like that. I can't believe that I just pulled that off, sliding the brush underneath the claws like that. And then I'm going to switch, grab my other brush. I'm going to get in between the toes. Get in between the toes. This is a weird spot that's kind of hard to hit because it's so low. Alright, and then at this point I would want to put another layer on, but the paint says no. So what I'm going to do instead is deviate from the plan. I'm going to take my bone white. I'm going to try to do something that I didn't think I'd have to do, which is try to wet blend this color a little bit. So I'm going to take the #1 brush, which is the only brush I've used tonight. You guys probably wanted to use the 0 brush for the smaller stuff. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick out parts of it, parts of the rock, to just make different. I'm just going to wet blend in there. We're going to use the paint and what it wants to do to our advantage. It'll come out a little bit. Just some quick wet blend, nothing too fancy. Just using the paint to blend, to kind of just get some highlight and just some difference in texture. And voila! Oh no! I did forget something.
What did you forget?
I forgot his mane. It's written right there. This will take, actually, 4. Welcome to my life as a painter. I finish a project 4 times before I actually finish it. And we'll just take our small brush.
Yeah.
Same thing, we're just going back to that glazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Get your second layer if you need it. This one only needs it in a couple of spots. There. Now he's done.
That is awesome. I'm gonna.
I feel like I've run a marathon.
There we go.
hopefully that works a little bit. So everything I just said, no one heard. Great. Just read my lips and we're good. I know one person that can do that really well. And so anyway, again, Margaret, thank you. Hopefully they cut to go on the road to Tiamat on your Facebook page and see all the great work that you've been doing there. And again, I know I pointed out the Org Zombie, but that's going to be October paint night, and we're going to try to work on some other events to get everybody painting again. But I'm done. Margaret, did you have anything to throw in there? You good?
No, I think I'm good. I'll probably leave the Manticore at the store, so if you guys want to come see them up close.
Awesome.
So,
Yeah, and please bring your Manticores in, and maybe we can get a big Manticore army. So, for now, have a great night, and we'll see you soon. Bye.